everyone, it's Jonathan, and welcome back to Every Version Ever. Today we're talking about the final theatrical Grinch film. There's still one more Grinch coming, but today we're talking about Illumination's The Grinch, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. As before, I'm joined once more by Nicki from Trivial Theater and Dan from TYTD Reviews, and if I'm correct, this is the first time I'm revisiting a movie that I did back in the early days of my YouTube channel, back when I was still doing short reviews before I pivoted to podcasting. And at the time, I was basically thoroughly underwhelmed by this movie. I thought it was fine, but I didn't love it, and I was hoping that with time, my views on it would have improved. And I was wrong. I think my view actually worsened. I feel like normally on this show, I'm more the voice of optimism against other people's more negative reactions to things. See our episode on Jim Carrey's The Grinch. But today, the scripts have flipped. Nicki and Dan enjoyed this one a lot more than I did. And yes, on the whole, this is not a bad movie. It's totally watchable. It has a lot of fun moments, but there's just some aspects of it that get under my skin and turn me into more of a Grinch than I would like to be. And before we get on to the episode, I just wanted to let you know that there is a bonus video up now on my Patreon, and this one is absolutely free. I realized a couple months ago that I was getting some free members signing up on Patreon, which I didn't even realize was a thing, so I've been trying to think of things that I could give the free members since my main Patreon offering is the Patreon podcast, which is behind the first tier. During our recording session for this episode, Dan went off on a completely random tangent about British television, and it was so hilarious I had to save it, so it will now be preserved as a bonus video for free on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Okay, I think that's all for now. Let's get on with our discussion on Illumination's 2018 animated take on The Grinch. I feel like I'm more disappointed in this one than I feel like I had too high of expectations, although I think I felt disappointed the first time I saw it, because I think I saw this one in the theater, and I thought maybe after a few years I would like it more. I really didn't. I don't know. Like, I feel like it made a bunch of choices that, well, for one, I feel like they padded the story, like stretched it way out, way further than it needed to be. I feel like Benedict Cumberbatch could have been good if he used his actual accent. It just felt wrong. Knowing that it's Benedict Cumberbatch, he just sounded off.
Yeah, I hate it when Biscuit Batch Cucumber Face doesn't use his real accent.
Yeah. I mean, he does a good American accent. It just, I don't know. It just felt wrong for the Grinch, even though the Grinch is technically American-ish. He's always had an American accent. They all do, but I don't know. It just felt wrong to have Benedict Cumberbatch playing this character who's supposed to be evil, and I don't know, his voice just sounds off.
So yeah, my problem with Bumbledunk Dinglesnatch was that when he was actually, the studio wanted him to do it in his original accent, and he actually put his foot down and was like, all of the rest of the American cast are doing their American voices. I want to do an American voice. I think he thought that it might be odd for him to do it in his natural voice, but then when you look at the original Grinch, Karloff didn't put an accent on, really. You know, he played it with a slight English lilt. So
yeah, I feel like it could have been elevated, I think, with a British accent.
Oh, agreed.
I don't know, when he gets out of bed in his tighty whities and then he puts on his tights or his pants that are, with the furry top, that definitely would have been more dignified with a British accent.
This is the thing. I only really had 3 issues with this, which is good for me.
I feel like I've got a lot more than that. I can't believe I'm going to be the Grinchy one on this one.
But we all have our ones that kind of stand out for that. The Halloween one for me was total and utter. This one is yours, and the musical is Dan's.
Well, I mean, it's a tough one between that and the Jim Carrey version.
The musical's going to be mine also. I have issues with this one, but I could watch it again and be fine. I don't ever want to see the musical again.
Spoilers, gents. Spoilers.
Why is this turned into a support group all of a sudden? I said never again, and then the NPC peacock popped up and it just started playing.
You're gonna get rickrolled with that when you least expect it. I guarantee you.
But yeah, I mean, for myself, I only really had three issues with the 2018 Grinch. The first one was, as you say, Jonathan, quite rightly, I think Benedict Cumberbatch, Dingle Dong Dingle Dunk, should have used his English voice. I think it would have suited the role quite a bit better. I also had a bit of a problem with how mean he was, or rather how mean he wasn't. It's like...
He was just a prankster.
Yeah, basically, he just came across as like an annoyed neighbor.
Yeah.
Like you've cut your bush a bit too low and he's going to just moan at you for a bit. It's like...
The worst thing he did
more...
was put somebody's pickle in his mouth and then give it back to them.
Yeah.
Hey, that's how COVID started.
He put that jar just slightly too high for that old lady to reach, and then when she sort of got a bit snarky with him, he knocked it onto the floor.
Oh, that's true. That was pretty bad also.
It was kind of mean. Kind of mean. Alistair Crowley would have had him like part of his fan club immediately for that kind of japery. But yeah, I wish that Grinch had been portrayed as less fluffy and approachable. I would have been happier with him being a bit meaner, rough around the edges, a bit more, I want to see stink lines off the guy, basically, up until the third act.
Think about the Illumination generally. Like, you look at, and maybe it's not the greatest comparison, but you look at, say, like Despicable Me. Yes, Gru wanted to steal the moon, but it's such an outrageous concept. The worst thing he did as an actual person was create a fart gun.
But this is the thing, like, if the Grinch is supposed to be the manifestation of meanness and mean-spiritedness, you would have thought that he would have at least matched Gru pound for pound, and he just kind of doesn't. He, like Jonathan said, I think the worst thing he does is put a pickle in his mouth, which is, it's just one of those things. I just kind of wish he'd been a little bit nastier.
This is besides stealing every single piece of Christmas stuff that's out there. He does kind of make up, he follows up the pickle with,
that's true.
destroying Christmas.
I know, but it feels like a bit of a snap, really, more than a gradual decline. Like in all of the other films, you kind of get the impression that he's one mean mother, and he builds up to stealing all of the toys as kind of the ultimate sort of reaction. But here, it's kind of like he's riding a 1 or 2 on the meanness scale. He occasionally hits a 3 as a speed bump, and then suddenly it shoots up at the end to like a 9 when he's stealing all the town's stuff. It's like, hang on a minute, how did he go from putting jars just out of reach and throwing small children into snowmen to robbing the entire town? Yeah, that was one thing. And I suppose the final thing I had issue with was, again, something Jonathan mentioned, was around about the second act, it really slows down. One of the big things I have problems with some of these later Grinch reimaginings is they put a lot more emphasis on Cindy Lou Who as a character. And I don't feel like she's that interesting enough of a character to warrant a B plot with her, plus 30 minutes of running around with her and her friends trying to figure out how to capture Santa. I think that the original doesn't show her enough. I think that the original could have benefited from having her a little bit more, but then every version after the original is kind of overcompensated and put her in way too much to its own detriment, because then you just end up with padding scenes, like where she's in the treehouse talking to her friends eating waffles, or where they randomly decide to go for a bike ride in slow-mo with a modern trendy pop song that the kids and teenagers these days bop to.
Old man yells at sky.
Basically. At the second act, it just kind of devolves into Cindy Lou Who just repeatedly saying, I need to catch Santa, I want to get a gift for my mum, intercut with the Grinch doing things that are kind of funny, but they don't really add anything to the overall plot. It's just kind of stuff that happens, like when he's doing his exercises, which is funny, but like, what does it add to the story? When he goes like reindeer
the Grinch
hunting,
and Max were the evil version of Wallace and Gromit.
Yeah. I could see it. I could see it. Definitely. It's pretty close, in fairness. I don't know. I feel like it had a very strong. I'll say the nice things about it as well. I thought it had a very, very strong opening, and I thought it had a pretty strong close. I actually think that the final sequence where the Grinch is invited to Cindy Lou's house for Christmas, I actually think that was more effective in this film than it was in the original. In the original, the reward that the Grinch gets for turning a new leaf and becoming good is very short-lived and undercut. It kind of just goes, and he's happy, and he gets some beef, and he gets some beast. Bye. Whereas this time they actually take the time to introduce him and have a bit of an awkward fumble around how he behaves socially, and eventually settles into a nice groove, and they actually make him feel like a more loved figure as a result of what happens. One thing that I think this film has over the Jim Carrey version is they put that humanist angle back in, and I don't think they do it as powerfully as the original, but I think that they do it in a way that makes it much more accessible to younger audiences of the 21st century versus kids from the 1960s. It's a little bit basic and it's a little bit watered down for my taste, but I'm an old man at this point, so I like my stuff convoluted and complex. Thank you very much. But keeping it nice and simple, and just saying that Christmas is something that comes from the heart, not from gifts, and the gifts don't matter. It's having people around and doing this thing, and that aspect being put back in and being kind of brought to the center, I thought was really nice. My only issue, offshoot of that, is that they don't really bed it in throughout the film. It just kind of comes out of nowhere about halfway through the second act, and then it's just like it's just a thing that's always been there, which I think is a bit odd. It would have been nice to have kind of had a bit more upfront about that, so that from the off that the Who's aren't just in it for the gifts and snarky one-liners. Also, I'm going to give Illumination some big credit. They didn't do a fart joke in this film, which is fantastic. I'm very proud of them.
I didn't even think about that, but you're right. They should get some props for that.
There's a reason he brings that up.
But yeah, I mean, on the whole, I really liked it. And that was another thing as well. I really liked how they reworked the Grinch's backstory as well. I don't think the Grinch necessarily needs a backstory personally, but I thought that they handled it better in this film than they did in the Jim Carrey version.
Yeah, that's probably true. The Jim Carrey one was very unnecessarily long.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was weird in that one. I probably am too nice to the Jim Carrey version just because I grew up with it. But it is true that this one technically does have a better backstory, even though it's kind of weird. I don't know. It is better technically.
I think they did better with the visuals as far as his whole backstory thing. Like, it's short, to the point.
Yes.
It didn't have to say, oh, well, when I was a kid, I was at an orphanage and there wasn't Christmas and I saw everybody else celebrating and I was so mad that I was left out and I removed myself from society. They just let the visuals do the talking, which, because the Jim Carrey one is just so, it has to show you every single moment of why, Christmas isn't his thing. It's done more concisely. But I would also agree that I think with any of these, full length pieces, they do stretch the story, and the Jim Carrey one versus this one versus the musical stretch them in different ways, but it's all like to the point where it's almost it's too much for the things that matter. You kind of lose a little focus.
I felt like this could have been a really great TV special.
Oh yeah,
because there was a lot that I did like in this. Like, the animation is great, and all of the stuff that is from the book was great. It's just all the stuff that they crammed in between all the other stuff that wore on me.
No, agreed.
I did enjoy some of the kind of side characters, like Fred the Moose was kind of fun, or the Fred the Reindeer was kind of fun.
Oh, I hated him.
Oh, I thought he was adorable. I mean, they brought him in where needed. Obviously, they didn't really need it for this, but I think because it's Illumination, they always have to have the big fuzzy beasts. The best friend, or the guy that lives down the mountain, was kind of a fun little character. And
he was like 50-50 for me. He had moments, but I was kind of annoyed by him too.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Although that's probably the point, because the Grinch hated him.
Yeah. And I really appreciated what they did with Max. I don't know. I really enjoyed Max in the Illumination one. He was probably my favorite character.
This is the cutest version of Max.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
And it was more, and I'm sure that they were probably trying to do damage control, because they did kind of, like you said, they did soften down what the Grinch was. And, when they're like trying to push the sled up the hill at the end, you see him trying to help push it as compared to leaving it all to Max.
Yeah.
Even with all the gadgets and such to get down the hill and to go from house to house. Like that whole section was fun. The way that they did that.
When they first got the reindeer, I was thinking, well, they're doing this because they don't want Max to be the one pulling the sled because that's too mean to the dog. But then the reindeer leaves, and I was like, well, then what was the point of having this thing take up all this time?
That was my thinking. I was exactly the same. I sat there, and the thing is, like, I kind of liked Fred. I thought my immediate thought was, oh, that would be a really, really cute, like, short film. Like, you know how Disney sometimes do short films ahead of their actual, like, main films. I could easily see a Fred the Moose short film playing ahead of, like, I don't know, a Minions movie or something like that if they really wanted to do it. And I was indifferent to the character. I was probably the same way that you were about Grinch's best friend at the bottom of the mountain. I was kind of like, some scenes I thought he was really, really effective. Some scenes it felt a little bit forced in, a bit like Illumination just wanted to put their mark on the film in
Mhm.
some way. And I really wasn't happy with the fact that they basically kind of brought him in, abandoned him, had him come back for like 20 seconds, and then abandoned him again.
Poor Fred.
Yeah, but I will say he was very cute. And I enjoyed the fact that he had a centre parting, which is always good. Any reindeer stroke moose with a centre parting isn't bad in my book.
You know, honestly, if they were going to make a side movie out of anything, I was really hoping it would be the Screaming Goat.
That
I
would be
hated
fun.
that too.
I quite like the screaming goat.
It was one of those things where it felt like one of those how do you do fellow kids moments because the screaming goat was like a meme on the internet for a while. It was like they're
Mm.
just throwing this in because kids think a screaming goat is funny.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the things I will say does hang over this film like a bad smell is the very creaking, relevant at the time references.
Oh yeah.
There's not a lot of them, but when they do pop up, whether it's just a very, very painfully 2018 soundtrack choice or a meme, like you say, or just some random, dance move, or there's just those little moments where I went, 20 years that's not going to have aged well. I don't want to have to explain to my great grandchildren what flossing was.
Yeah, all the kids stuff you could definitely there was a 40-year-old trying to write for a
Yes.
for a 10-year-old.
Mm,
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah,
yeah.
it was so painful every time Cindy Lou was talking. It's like she's supposed to be like 5 or 6. She does not sound 5 or 6.
No.
I think that's probably my biggest gripe. Is probably Cindy Lou. Every time she did something, I was just kind of annoyed because I could tell that it was supposed to be cute, but it just didn't feel real.
Mm.
And it took me out of the movie completely.
It it felt to me like they wanted to do something very, very different from the character as has been portrayed previously, because normally she's kind of shown to be a very wide-eyed, honest and caring and loving character. She's very much just there to try and be the moral grounding peg. This film kind of wanted to give her a bit more character, but I think they just kind of put her through the standard Illumination character mold, and the sort of end result is a bit of a strange character that doesn't quite fit the universe that she's in.
Hmm.
I mean, the thing is, again, I kind of fell 50-50 with it. For me, I would have been happier. I think, as you said, if this was maybe like a TV special length, maybe an hour, and
Yeah.
we cut a good chunk of her sections out and some of the Grinch's training montage stuff out. Um, I think you
We're
probably would
not
have had a
losing the
pretty.
training montage stuff. That was much needed. How could you think that that shouldn't be in there?
I love the bit where he did the thing and then did the thing again and then did the thing again.
Well, and like you say, it's totally 80s or not 80s, 2018. And I just got
Yeah.
thinking about it. And again, back to the whole Illumination thing. You could have taken Cindy Lou and put her in with the with Gru's kids, and she would
Oh
have been
yeah.
kind of a total like mishmash of the three of them. Or if
Yeah,
nothing else, the
kind
two
of.
younger two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was another thing as well, thinking about it really was it was something that I noticed at the time that I wasn't particularly happy with. I wasn't very happy, and this sounds weird, but stay with me. It does have a resolution, I assure you. Um, is the fact that they made Cindy Lou's house the last house that the Grinch visits before he takes all the stuff up Mount Crumpet. Like for me personally, when I've seen previous versions of this film, Cindy Lou's house is usually somewhere in the middle of the stack whilst he's going through the town. And in my head, at least, the way that it has worked previously is that Cindy Lou is a chance encounter with somebody who is so optimistic and so positive and so caring and so, the opposite of what the Grinch is, that the Grinch, it stays in his mind. And when the Grinch leaves and continues to rob the houses, the idea is that slowly but surely that kind of starts to melt his sort of barriers and defenses. But by putting her as the last house, it kind of gives her a bit more of a kind of unique standing figure, like the sort of last boss vibes to things. And it kind of made her out to be a bit more special than I think she should be. Like, I don't think that Cindy as a character should be this unique, special, distinct person. I think she should just be a normal person who, by showing caring and loving and consideration to everyone around her, manages to change a miserly old man's heart into, cutting up the roast beast. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like putting her on a bit of a pedestal as a character kind of takes away from that aspect. I feel it works better when she is just a character that could be in an everyman or woman, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the issue too, and it's again an Illumination thing. I'm going to become a broken record on this, but they kind of do have to have that one character you can center in on. That's kind of the day saver, like the kids in Despicable Me, or that one minion in the Minions movie. You know the one I'm talking about.
Not really.
I don't either.
It's been way too long since I've seen that.
But you know what I mean? There's that they think that they can't just tell the story, they have to give you something to focus on in that respect. So you're not, the story itself, because the Grinch is, you can't relate to the Grinch if you're 10 years old.
Well, I did.
You're not 10 years old. Nor were you 10 at that point in time.
I was 10 years old once.
Well,
long ago, in the mists of time, when the sweets tasted sweeter, and I swear those stairs didn't take half the time they do to climb.
That's just because you had a very, very, very large dinner.
That is true. I did have a to-go plate. It was very, very nice.
You're like Kirby, like when he's eaten too much and he kind of bounces down the street and his whole body goes flubbery. I would be like that too. I'm just saying that's what you're coming from here. So
no, you are 100% spot on. It's it was quite a climb to be here today. I hope you all appreciate the sacrifices I made, climbing those 16 steps to plop down in front of my desk, full of Chinese food and sugar plums and visions of the Grinch in hot pants doing squats with the words "Go time" on his butt.
That was an interesting, talking of that, not that specifically, but Pharrell Williams is obviously a cornerstone when it comes to a lot of Illumination. What did you guys think of the music and kind of the choices?
It was pretty good. If you're gonna update it, I didn't mind it. It's a little strange, but it was probably the least of anything that I could complain about.
I thought he was really, really good as the narrator. I really liked the vibe that he gave off. Again, I think if you were going to modernize the original Grinch film, I think he did a really solid job of, delivering the lines with a degree of warmth and character, which I think has been missing from some previous versions of the Grinch films. Music choices, 50-50. Some of it I thought was really, really good. Some I really, really liked. And some I kind of, again, I thought was a little creaky, was not going to age particularly well in terms of, when something's so painfully 2010s or painfully 90s that you go, yeah, that's not going to make it out of the decade alive, frankly. That's kind of where I was with the music. Where it was good, it was fantastic. Where it was less than good, there was a little bit of, okay, about it.
I will say my favorite part, I don't know how you guys will feel. The carolers, they were voiced by Pentatonics, who are one of my favorite groups. Like I love their music, and I love their Christmas music, and I recognize them instantly. Before I even looked, the first time I watched this, before I even looked up to find out if they were in the movie, I was like, "That's Pentatonics." I kind of liked them chasing him around the town.
Yeah, that was good. I like that.
The ominous snapping as they came after him.
I quite like the recurring joke with the alarm clock as well. I thought that was quite funny, where he keeps hitting it and it just keeps going off, so he throws it off the cliff. And then later in the film, he throws a dresser off the cliff onto it because it goes off again.
I do wonder how many dressers he went through.
But his bedroom is very precariously placed over that gaping chasm.
That's his whole house.
I mean, on that subject, in terms of the humor of the film, it was kind of again a little bit of a mixed bag. Like,
Yeah.
I think when the jokes landed, they were really, really good. There was some Illumination brand comedy that I've seen in things like the Mario Brothers movie and Despicable Me previously, where I was kind of like, oh, they're doing that joke again. Okay, fine. I suppose the only sticking point I kind of had on the humor front really was, and I've dubbed this Marvelization, which is basically a lot ever since the Marvel movies started to do really, really, really well. Most kids' films or family films or films that have a bit of a comedy angle have basically just started to do slightly snarky Marvel-esque one-liners, or
Mm.
they've gone down the Deadpool route of breaking the fourth wall to be funny. And I'm kind of iffy on Marvelization on the whole because I think sometimes it can work quite well, but most of the time it just feels like a bit of a pale imitation. Like it's just like writers have gone, hey, people like a bit of snark. Go watch Guardians of the Galaxy and put some of that kind of stuff in there. I mean, on the whole, I thought it was a solid enough comedy, but there was just a few moments where I kind of went, okay, they're doing the Marvel thing. Okay, fine, they're retreading ground from the Super Mario Brothers movie or whatever. Fine, but yeah, again, on the whole, I thought it was quite fun. But there were just these from a few moments where I was kind of like, okay, we'll grit and bear it for now.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't hate this movie, even though I have a lot of complaints about it. I think it's fine. I wouldn't have a problem with watching it again. Like if a kid wanted to watch it, one of my nephews, yeah, that's fine. I wouldn't mind this one. It's just I wouldn't choose to watch this one by myself because it just has so many things that I'm just kind of mildly annoyed by. Like I don't even like I say I hate the moose or reindeer, whatever it was. I don't hate him. He's just like he didn't need to be there, so I'm annoyed that he's there.
I think I'd agree with you on that point. I would probably best describe this film as a compromise film,
Yeah.
which is I want to watch the original 1966 Karloff version. My nephew, who's 4, loves this film to pieces. This is inoffensive enough that I could quite happily put it on
Yeah.
and not force my 4-year-old nephew to watch the Karloff version just because I really want to watch it. It's like, okay, fine, we'll sit and watch this. I can sit through this.
See, I would say that this is, and I guess I don't have the love of the Jim Carrey one the way that, at least from a nostalgia perspective, that you have, John. But this one, even when I first saw it, which I went to the theater and saw it with my friend's kids, I think it's a middle ground, like kind of a nice middle ground between the original and the Jim Carrey one. You know, you have the relative story and a lot of the good stuff from the original, but then it also has kind of that humor and stuff of the Jim Carrey one without going as far as the Jim Carrey one was. So you know that you can
Mhm.
sit down a kid in front of it and they're going to be fine. They're not going to be traumatized by, oh, Jeffrey Tambor's, weird hair or whatever,
Stupid, sexy Grinch ruins Christmas. I would also like to just take a moment as well to say that of all of the things from all the different versions of the Grinch adaptations, I think that outside of the original, this film is probably, in my opinion, the best in terms of trying to realize Whoville as a place. Like all of the character models, barring Cindy Lou Who, in my opinion, they all look really nice. They're like the design is very clean and clear. They
Yeah.
clearly used the source material very well. I mean, I was speaking to Triv once we watched it last night, and at the end of it, I basically said that it kind of felt like they took the best bits of the book, the original version, and the Jim Carrey version, polished them up and tweaked them a little bit so that they made a bit more sense, and then kind of slammed them all together into one kind of mega movie that tries to tick as much off as possible in terms of what you would want to see in a Grinch film. And in some it
Mhm.
succeeds and some it doesn't, but I thought the way they realized creatively, artistically, Whoville and its characters was really solid. It's just a shame that the Grinch and Cindy Lou both kind of work against what you would expect them to be, at
Mhm.
least here. So
Yeah, this was probably the best looking world of any of the movies we've talked about. Because, like, I do like the Jim Carrey version, but as far as like designs and feeling Seussian, I think this one does a bit better with that.
yeah.
But yeah, the Grinch and Cindy Lou are probably the weakest designs of all these. Cindy Lou in particular, she just doesn't look correct to me.
Oh, come on. You don't want to see the Grinch wearing tidy whities and putting fuzzy shorts up over top of everything else?
I'm actually kind of traumatized that the Grinch wears fuzzy shorts.
They just wanted to make sure you knew that he's not actually naked.
Absolutely. Also, okay, I did appreciate like when he's dragging his groceries back up the hill, like, and even that whole bit where he's like an emotional eater and all that stuff. I did kind of appreciate where the friend guy pulls out like the hair dye and he's like glorious green goddess. That
Mm.
I those little moments I thought were pretty great.
Yeah, I quite liked that. I said to Trev while we were watching, "Oh, he uses the same brand as me, only I go for Tangerine Dream."
I use brownie explosion myself, or brownie batter
Hmm.
explosion. I could also just be craving DQ.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh no, you got me fancying ice cream. That's going to be a problem.
It could be, yes.
Oh well.
I'll just send Max out after some for you.
Did you know that this script was written by the guy who wrote Cool Runnings?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I must have missed that. That's kind of a different type of a movie that you would expect.
And the guy who directed this is more of a producer generally. He's got, I think, 34 producing credits and 4 directing credits. But his production catalogue basically includes all of Kevin Smith's films from Clerks through to Clerks 2, so 1993 to 2004. So basically all of Kevin Smith's sort of main hitter films he helped produce. So
Oh, there you go.
People can have many varied interests,
100%.
completely opposite types of movies than what you would have expected from somebody directing Illumination's The Grinch.
yeah, the only other guy involved was a guy called Yarrow Cheney. He had 4 directing credits, and he was basically this was his biggest credit. The other films around him, he directed a Minions short, and he directed a portion of the Minions movie, and that was it pretty much. So like the two big guys who did this worked with John Candy and Kevin Smith, which I thought was quite odd, given the sort of tone and vibe of the film. It's nice though to know that.
Well, that's kind of like was it Jim Wynorski that did a kids movie?
Yes, he did. What was it?
So there's this guy that does a lot of low budget movies, does a lot of horror and things like that. But then he did this one random kids movie. I can't remember what it
Munchie.
was. Yes. So it's
He did Munchie.
kind of like Mac and Me or E.T. sort of, only more like goofy, and it was voiced by Dom DeLuise. But it's this movie called Munchie, and quite an interesting kids movie, but quite different from all the other stuff that he did.
Oh yes.
I've seen your video on that. I didn't realize that was supposed to be a kids movie. I thought it was a parody of kids
Nope.
movies.
I mean, the guy who made it often made parodies of good movies, so it wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, no, this was supposed to be a proper kids film.
It's better than Munchies.
Oh,
Don't watch
Munchies is
Munchies.
terrible. Oof.
I will also, and this is kind of a random production piece, but when the Grinch goes and steals all the toys and trees and such, I really enjoyed all the little gadgets that he had. Like, they were fun imaginings of, using Christmas stuff, and it was much better done than what the mean one did with them.
That was the point where I really felt like they were taking a cue from Wallace and Gromit, because I'd already been thinking about Max as if they'd just taken Gromit and turned him into an Illumination character. But then the Grinch started whipping out all these gadgets and doing all these things. I was like, it's just they're both Wallace and Gromit.
I did like there was a bit towards the end I quite liked where he had like the go-go gadget springy shoes. And he was kind of like going over the houses, picking stuff up from the chimneys. Whilst that, I thought that was very well handled. It was all done with like one long tracking shot panning across the rooftops as he was moving, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah, no, it was a very well-made movie. It looked very good. I loved all the stuff like that.
Yeah. I would also add, just like with the gadgets and stuff, looking at what they did, and I keep going back to Despicable Me, but it's the only Illumination movie I can think of right now. But it does share a lot of that DNA, like the way that they do the gadgets. They're kind of whimsical and weird and, thought up by someone that's probably 12.
Or 12 at heart.
Yeah.
But you know what? The best inventions usually are.
That's true.
At the very end, did you guys think that they were trying to set up something between Cindy Lou's mom and the Grinch?
Yeah.
Kinda.
I'm uncomfortable.
Meet your
Frankly,
new green stepdad.
One last thing, I did make a note of something. His frenemy, Bricklebomb, he had a horrible little dog. Did anybody else think that it looked like a cutified version of Gru's nasty little creature from Despicable Me?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
And was that on purpose?
I'm assuming so. Again, it's kind of keeping within that, like how every Looney Tunes that stars Bugs Bunny is going to have those little nut things. I'm sure they're probably doing like little nods to their people there too.
Absolutely.
Well, I think this is probably a good place to end this one. We will be back next time. We've saved the worst for last. We'll be talking about the live NBC musical version of The Grinch. But until then, do you guys want to let people know where they can find you if they would like more from you? Dan?
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Jonathan. Yes, absolutely. So you can find me at TYTD Reviews on YouTube and Letterboxd and Instagram and Twitter. I'm not sure exactly when this episode is going out, but we're going to be having a bit of a hiatus now through the summer. Should be back in the autumn time, and we'll be coming back with a rip-roarer of a film called New York Ninja. So do be sure to hop over, subscribe, and we'll be back in the fall, hopefully, with some kung fu kicks and New York chicks. And thanks again.
And Nicki?
As ever, an absolute pleasure, John. You can find me here on YouTube at Trivial Theater. I do a wide array of random, obscure, and straight-up bad movies. There's probably something that's out. At this point, I can't exactly tell you what, but I'm sure it'll be an interesting piece, and we will all have laughed heartily at it. So yeah, stop by and say hello.
Okay, well, we will see you next time to talk about The Grinch musical. So, we'll see you then. Thanks for listening to Every Version Ever. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow my co-hosts as well. My link tree and all of our links will be in the description below. If you want more of my content, all my podcasts are available on YouTube as well as most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this show, check out one of the other podcasts or check out my Patreon for bonus and extended episodes you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.